Hello everyone, this is Jotto and welcome to the Hearthstone Weekly Show. Now for this week I am going over not one but two decks I've been thinking about making when certain wings of BRM come out. So in the case of the Shaman deck, I think it can be made by wing 4 I want to say, but in the case of the Paladin deck, wing 5. So those two decks I'm kind of building around. The Shaman deck is a mid-rangey, sort of kind of overload deck. Running the new Fireguard Destroyer. No, that's Fire Elemental. Thank you. Fireguard Destroyer. And not Lava Shock, actually. I'll get to that when I get to it. And the other deck is a Dragon Paladin deck. So, without further ado, let's start with the Shaman. So, as I said, this is a mid-rangey Shaman build. So, we'll just start with the Shaman cards themselves. We've got Earth Shock, pretty self-explanatory. One of the best silencers you can get your hands on. Crackle over Rockbiter or Lightning Bolt. I think it's better than Lightning Bolt, pretty much straight up. And I'm running it over Rockbiter because I don't have any Rockbiter synergies in this deck. It also activates Unbound Elemental, which we'll get onto next. Now, Unbound Elemental is a card that has been fairly clunky recently and just hasn't been that good. The overload really does mess you up. However, one thing changed. Fireguard Destroyer is a 4-drop overload card that is absolutely astonishingly good. Massive stats for the cost, probably the single largest 4-drop you can get ever. It can go up to a 7-6, which yes gets Big Game Hunter, but there's Boom in this list to take advantage of that. But if it becomes a 6-6, it's basically the largest thing on the board for turns. It is astonishingly huge and just a very, very good card. And in my opinion, good enough to make Unbound Elemental possibly playable again, because that's an amazing curve. Unbound Elemental into Fireguard Destroyer gives you a 3-5 and anywhere between a 4-6 and a 7-6. I think that's actually better than the Dragon 1-2 punch of Blackwing Technician into Hungry Dragon. One gives you a 5-6 with a drawback, on top of 3-5, the other one gives you a 3-5 that can still keep growing, and a potentially 6-6 or 7-6. Now, obviously, the Fireguard Destroyer can also be a 4-6, but it doesn't really have a drawback, just the one overload, and it can be much, much larger in most situations. Now, as for the rest of the class cards, we've got Flame Tongue Totem. You notice there's an edit marker here. Yeah, I forgot to add Flame Tongues in the first time. So, Flame Tongue Totem, still as good as ever. We're also running Harvest Golem and Haunted Creeper, along with just your hero power, which makes it absolutely amazing and very, very powerful. One of the more underestimated cards unless you play against it. It's just astonishingly good and one of my favorite Shaman cards, and I think it's one of those cards which you just never want to cut from any Shaman list. One-off Feral Spirit. Now, I'm not running two of these, even though it's an overload deck. The reason for this is because while it curves with Unbound Elemental if you go second or even first, actually, the problem is, if you play Feral on turn 3, you can't play Fireguard Destroyer, which is really awkward. So as a result, I'm actually only running one, because I don't want to draw two of them, and it's nice to have an emergency taunt, but I'm running Sludge Belchers in here for emergency taunt as well. So while it's an emergency taunt, I'd rather only run the one, because it's a bit awkward on curve in this particular deck. Hex, arguably the best removal spell in the game. You have access to it, you play two. That's basically what I have to say about Hex. Lightning Storm has Overload, wipes the board, there's a ton of aggro decks running around right now. Very, very powerful spell, worth running two of in my opinion. The last class card is the Fire Elemental, which I actually find it quite funny that the best Shaman class card from pre-BRM and the best one in BRM look very similar. I know they're both Fire Elementals. I mean, it's kind of funny because Fireguard Destroyer is more Lava Elemental. Yeah, but anyway, so the point is, Fire Elemental, astonishingly good, as everyone who doesn't play Shaman is going to find out, because they'll be playing with Blackwing Corruptor, which is basically a Fire Elemental in Dragon decks. Fire Elemental is one of the best cards in the entire game. I actually put him towards the top of several top 10 lists I've done to do with cards in the past. He's very, very powerful, kills something, and then usually takes one or even two cards to kill himself, because a 6-5 is generally bigger than anything else you can possibly play. The average sort of large minion stats is 5-5, so a 6-5, he hits harder, he's very, very large, still trades with his 5-5s, but then the Battle Cry will help pick off some of the smaller stuff, which means he's not a tempo loss, which is why he has the advantage over Savannah Highmane, for example. So very, very powerful 6-drop to round out the class cards. As for the neutrals, First things first, one-off Zombie Chow. Now, at first I had 2 of these in here because you need early game, you need to be able to block stuff. The reason I put this down to 1 is simply because of space issues, and it's one of the more clunky cards to draw 2 of. So, it's a very good one-drop. You kind of need it, actually, at least as a one-of, in my opinion, in the current metagame, which obviously will change. It will change with BRM, but just the way things seem to be going with more early game and mid-rangey strategies, then Zombie Chow becomes better, and the drawback actually isn't that relevant, because generally the longer the game goes, the more advanced you are. So, really like the Zombie Chow. Haunted Creeper. Now, Haunted Creeper, along with Harvest Golem, are your Flame Tongue Totem enablers, as I like to call them. They're both absurd with Flame Tongue Totem. Haunted Creeper lets you kill something with 3 health, and then 2 more things with 3 health the next turn, because of the 1/1s, and Harvest Golem does it for 4. So Harvest Golem, straight up value, same with Haunted Creeper, just massive value for the cost, and it works really well with the 2 bodies because of Flame Tongue Totem. Piloted Shredder, similar principle. Now, Piloted Shredder's in here because I wanted 4 4-drops. Now, the reason I wanted 4 4-drops is because when Fireguard Destroyer gets overload, he stops you from playing a lot of your 5-drops, which is why there's only 3 5-drops in this deck, as opposed to what most Shamans have been running, which is up to 5. But there's 4 4-drops instead of the standard 2. So, Piloted Shredder is a turn 5 play to have after Fireguard Destroyer, and he also shores up your turn 4. On top of that, Piloted Shredder is the best 4-drop you can be playing outside of Fireguard, simply because he works well with Flame Tongue. Again, he works very well with Flame Tongue, and he's just a pain in the neck to remove, survives AoE very well, and a lot of 2-drops are extremely powerful. Now, sometimes it can mess you up, but that's what RNG is like sometimes. On to the 5-drops, which I feel like Shaman is normally known for. Only 1 Azure Drake. Space issues, quite frankly. I wanted to run 1. It was either this or Anti-Heal Bot or a second Sludge Belcher, and I decided on the Azure Drake, but then if there's a lot of Face Hunter, you're going to want Anti-Heal Bot, and Azure Drake isn't that good against Face Hunter. Let's just say this is work in progress, and when this deck actually does get built, I'm going to be tinkering around with things, because I do want to fit an Anti-Heal Bot in here somewhere, I just don't know how. But Azure Drake, very, very good against those mid-ranging and control decks, lets you draw more cards, which makes your Emperor Thorazan better, because you'll have a higher hand size when you play him, but the spell damage is also astonishingly good with things like Earth Shock and Lightning Storm, as you find out whenever you roll Spell Power Totem. So Azure Drake is very, very good. Very, very good. I mean, it's going to see more play in the Shaman decks that are running dragons. Like, if you're running dragons, you want 2 Azure Drakes. Why? Because he's a dragon, and he's one of the better dragons you can possibly run. But in this deck, I'm just running the 1-of, and I'm not sure if that's correct, but we'll have to see. 2 Sludge Belchers. Now, Sludge Belcher is the old and faithful one from Naxxramas. The reason I've got 2 Sludge Belchers in here is because I'm pretty sure aggro decks are going to be all the range, and I'd rather have 2 Sludge Belchers over something like 2 Azure Drakes, because I'm going to need to stabilize the board a little bit. It also works really well with Emperor. You can protect Emperor for multiple turns. I've done this with other decks so far, and it's just been absolutely amazing. Speaking of Emperor, now Emperor Thorazan or Thorizian or what, I don't know. I've heard like 15 ways of pronouncing this, and I imagine someone's probably typing already correcting me. But anyway, the Emperor Thorazan is a 6-mana 5/5, and at the end of the turn, he reduces the cost of all your cards in your hand by 1. This guy got an insane amount of hype, and we've got him in the game right now, and I can quite frankly say he is astonishingly good. I have played a lot with him, and from what I can tell, when you play him once, he gives you pretty decent value actually, just the 1 activation. If he lives a turn and you get a second activation, you win. I haven't lost so far when I've had 2 activations from a Thorazan. I've had 3 before. I have heard of someone having 4 and losing. I don't know how that happened, but yeah, the reduced cost is absolutely ridiculous. Especially in something like Shaman. Like, just if we go up the list of it, you got Thorazan. Now what does he do? If you coin him, he reduces your boom to 6 mana. Now if you're playing Chromagus or something, then you get to play those on curve. Same with any other 8-drops. But you come up here, Earthshock becomes free. Crackle becomes Lightning Bolt with an upside. You got Flame Tongue becomes almost free, which is really important actually, and it just mitigates a lot of your overload cost. Fire Elemental becoming 5 is extremely relevant later in the game, so you can go Fire Elemental into Totem or Fire Elemental into Sludge Belcher on turn 10, or turn 9 if they were both in your hand. So it just accelerates you in ways that few other cards do. Really like Thorazan, and usually you'll have probably about 4 or 5 cards extra in your hand once you play Thorazan. Because you're playing Shaman, sometimes you just Totem, or you might play an Azure Drake on turn 5, and as a result, he just becomes absolutely amazing and gets so much value out of that ability. Very, very good card. The last 2 cards here, Sylvanas. Now, I was trying to figure out whether or not to cut Sylvanas for various other things, because this deck had serious space issues. Had some really bad space issues. However, Sylvanas, I think, is incredibly unique, very powerful effect. And usually when cutting Sylvanas, it's very difficult to figure out whether or not you should be keeping it. Now, the other alternative was another 5-drop. Like Loatheb could have been very good, like a second Azure Drake, like a heal bot. Now, the reason I ran Sylvanas instead is because, again, 5-drops become a bit awkward because of Fire Guard Destroyer, whereas 6-drops are not that awkward. So you overload on turn 4, play another 4-drop like a Shredder, or even another Fire Guard Destroyer, and then you can play your 5-drop. Or you play Shredder on turn 5, and then you've got Sylvanas or Fire Elemental on turn 6. So it works better with the curve that way, as opposed to what it used to be, which was that you overload on turn 3, or on turn 5, depending on the composition of your hand, and then you played your 4-drop and 5-drop, or you didn't play anything that much on 4, and then you played your 5-drop and maybe your 6-drop. So the overload curve has changed because of Fire Guard Destroyer is just that good. Speaking of cards that are just that good, the Marquee Legendary from GVG is still here. Boom is still absolutely amazing. This is why I said Fire Guard Destroyer's potential downside of having 7 attacks sometimes is not that bad because, well, it saves your Boom. And if you get Boom for reduced cost and you get to play a removal spell with him, that's just better. I mean, you play Thorazan and think, oh, I just have Boom and I have an extra mana. Yeah, but that extra mana can go into something like Crackle. So Shaman work very, very well with Thorazan's reduced cost. So Dr. Boom, so much value. The 2 Boom bots are just insane, and then you get your 7/7, absolutely amazing card. And I don't really see him going anywhere fast because he's just absolutely amazing. And if you cut him, it's usually because you're playing no big game hunter targets at all. Now, speaking of no big game hunter targets, the other deck that I wanted to go over quickly, as you just see the curve at the bottom here, a lot of 3s. Maybe that's a bit too many 3s. It's difficult to tell. I mean, 2 of those do have Overload. So one on Storm, which doesn't really count as a 3-drop. So maybe a few too many 3s, should shift that over to 4 and maybe 7+. Neptulon, for example. But anyway, onto the other deck I was tinkering with. Post BRM Dragon Paladin. Now, this is mostly because of Dragon Consort. That's Quartermaster. Dragon Consort is astonishingly good. 5 mana, 5/5, and he reduces the next dragon you play by 2. So that's where I got the idea for this deck from. So starting with the Paladin cards, we got some additions from GVG to start with. Shielded Minibot to hold down the early game as a 2-drop, very, very good. Then we've got Muster for Battle, again, very, very good. He also works very well with a Hungry Dragon. Now, Muster for Battle working well with Hungry Dragon is just simply because if the 1-drop has 1 health, then the Light's Justice from the Muster for Battle will kill it. On top of that, if it has 2 health, you just use a token to do so, which means that you pretty much negate Hungry Dragon's drawback, so to say. So the Muster for Battle is extremely good in this deck, and I do have the 1 Quartermaster, not 2, because that's a bit too clunky in this particular type of deck, but the 1 does work. Eldor Peacekeeper, 3/3 that shuts down almost anything, I will take it. There aren't any equalities in this list, which might be a mistake. Again, work in progress. So, yeah, this deck relies on board position as opposed to reacting to the board. So I didn't really think quality was a good fit, but in testing that might be inaccurate and may have to go back and revise that. So, Eldor Peacekeeper, very, very good for maintaining board position while you deal with the big things like Giants. They become 1/8s, which are not particularly useful. True Silver Champion, the second best weapon in the game after Deathspite, in my opinion. Paladin really relies on this thing on turn 4, quite frankly. Although now you've got Hungry Dragon, which does help out. But True Silver, absolutely amazing on turn 4. Will usually kill 2 things or an entire Shredder, which is fine, and it heals you for 4 while doing so, so you don't take that much damage while you're hitting stuff with your face. The other thing it does is heal you a bit late game against Face Hunter, for example. You get to heal 4, and it's just a very, very good weapon in general. It also does 8 damage, relevant for closing out the game later. Consecration, standard AoE is standard. It's pretty much the most vanilla AoE in the entire game. It is funny if you think about that. Paladin does get the most vanilla AoE. It doesn't have any random effect on it, or any side effects, or anything like that. It's just 4 mana, deal 2 damage. But just because it's simple does not mean it isn't effective. It is actually very, very good and necessary against aggro decks. So, on to Dragon Consort. Now, Dragon Consort is going to be working with a couple of different dragons in this set, and also just from previous sets in general. But Dragon Consort reduces by 2, and this is something notable. It reduces the next dragon, not next turn, not this turn, the next dragon. So play your consort on curve, and when you draw your next dragon, you get to play it for less. That's basically how that works, and that's why I think it's very, very good, because you don't need a dragon in your hand. You just play it, you top deck your dragon later, and then you play it for less. So Dragon Consort, very good in my opinion. Quartermaster, as I said, one of, because it's too clunky if you have that many 5-drops. However, that effect is super good late game. The other thing this works with is Thorazan. Yes, you can play your 4-mana Quartermasters, your 2-mana Musters, and you can hero power. So what do you get? You get that combo for 8 mana. Or you just play it for 6 instead of 8, and then you get to play, for example, True Silver. Now, there aren't 2 Quartermasters in this deck, so I can't live for the dream of going Muster for Battle, Quartermaster, Quartermaster on turn 10. That seems fair, and I'm hoping that someone pulls that off, and I will do in other decks, but in this deck I think the one-off is good. Lay on Hands. Now, Lay on Hands and therefore Tyrion afterwards are the 2 staple late game Paladin cards. I'm not running anti-heal bot, so I felt as if I needed the healing in another form. And I think Lay on Hands is quite good. It also keeps my hand full, and considering I will have board advantage for a lot of the game, I think this is worth investing into. The other thing about Lay on Hands and Tyrion is that they curve with Thorazan, so you can actually just Lay on Hands to kind of heal back all the life. They just go for you instead of Thorazan. You heal back all the life, you draw 3 more cards, he triggers again, they're in trouble. And you can play Tyrion to curve to do pretty much the same thing, or if they kill him, then you play Tyrion, they don't have as much of a board anymore, and they both work really, really well with Thorazan. Speaking of Tyrion, Tyrion is one of the single best 8-drops in the entire game. He doesn't die to big game hunter, he's hard to kill, almost always gets silenced because he's just that obnoxious, and his death rattle is astonishingly powerful. A 5/3 weapon is 15 damage. Yet, I don't really need to say how good Tyrion is, because he's been tried and tested and proven that he's one of the single best class legendaries in the entire game, and will continue to do so. So, on to the neutrals. Zombie Chow. Yeah, Tech Builder not behaving itself this time. So yeah, Zombie Chow. Again, pretty much same logic I had with the Shaman list. Yeah, this is more of a drawback again, but you are going to have a lot more late game than most other decks, so you should be fine later on. But the drawback is there, but having a one-off I think is fairly necessary, because Paladin is not fantastic until turn 2 or 3 usually, so you need something on turn 1 just to stabilize against the aggro decks. And Zombie Chow will kill things like Leper Gnome without dying. So, pretty much necessary one-off. Knife Juggler. Just because there's a new set does not mean that this guy isn't as insane as he always has been with Muster for Battle. That is 3 damage plus your weapon, so basically 4 scatter damage whenever you play these two together. On top of that, you can play him on turn 2, and he works with the hero power, so very, very good, just straight up damage output. He also distracts your opponent a bit while you're messing around with your other combos. Basically, they have to kill it, because otherwise it'll do a ton of damage to them, so he's a good removal magnet. Blackwing Technician, one of the Blackwing cards I'm running in this deck. I'm running both. 3 mana 3/5 is huge! We talked about this a bit with Unbound Elemental, but this deck is running the semi-equivalent to what the Shaman deck has with Unbound into Fireguard Destroyer with Blackwing Technician to Hungry Dragon. So you get a 3 mana 3/5, which is bigger than almost anything, and will pretty much stomp on 3-drops, and even some 4-drops, like Shredder. It basically kills Shredder. Technician will basically kill a Shredder, unless they get Millhouse Mana Storm. Then it will not kill a Shredder. But if your 1 in how many it is the only thing that beats the Technician, I mean, there's probably another one in there somewhere, something with just more than 3 life. But the point is that it will basically murder a Shredder and will kill almost any other 3-drop. So the Blackwing Technician is very, very good. Hungry Dragon, staple 4-drop in Dragon decks. It's what you curve into after your Blackwing Technician. The drawback is actually pretty small. We talked about this on the set review a lot. There's percentages and such to do with that. And on top of that, 5/6 is massive. It does kill things like Sludge Belcher very fast. It also trades with Loatheb because of the drawback, reduces it to probably 5/5 or 5/4 after everything. But if you have Blackwing Technician, use a Technician to kill it instead. So you just get your 4 mana 5/6. Hungry Dragon I'm expecting to be very, very good, and that's why he's in this deck. Azure Drake. Now, Azure Drake is not really a Paladin staple. However, you have Dragon Consort and also Blackwing Technician and Corruptor. So you kind of need the Drakes in here just to add Dragon count. Now, the Dragon Consort into Azure Drake is kind of insane. There is a ridiculous curve you can do, which is Dragon Consort into Dragon Consort Hungry Dragon, which seems a bit ridiculous. That's if you coin the Consort. If you don't coin the Consort, you can actually go Consort turn 5, Consort turn 6 for 3, and then you get an Azure Drake for 3. So that does lead to some ridiculous curves, but Azure Drake just keeps your hand size large for the Emperor Thorazan, works with Consecration, which is actually relevant. 3 damage is way more than 2 when you're talking about AoEs, and as I said, increases your dragon count, which is extremely relevant. Blackwing Corruptor, I mentioned this guy earlier when I was talking about Fire Elemental. Basically as good, if not better than Fire Elemental if you're holding a dragon, obviously. Now there are a lot of dragons in this deck. When I say a lot, there's, what, 5, 6, 7? Yeah, there's 7. And the Blackwing Corruptor is that good that I actually think that you would maybe skip playing Hungry Dragon on turn 4 just to play Corruptor with an active. I think he's that good. Dealing 3 damage to something is just astonishing. And the fact that he lets you get back on board while killing something at the same time is an ability that only Shaman has had before, and other classes really haven't outside of something like Keeper of the Grove, for example. Paladin especially have not had it. So it is a very, very good effect to give them, and I foresee the Corruptor being extremely good. Loatheb is in here. Now the reason Loatheb is in here is because, besides the fact that you don't have Overload because you're playing Paladin, this deck is also something that really wants board advantage. You play stuff to the board and you want Loatheb to make it stick so you can deal a bunch of damage. Loatheb has always been as good as he's ever been, basically. That sentence got away from me. But the only thing he's bad against from the new set is basically Hungry Dragon. But Hungry Dragon will usually trade with it, but the effect still happens. So, Loatheb, still very, very good in this kind of deck. Thorazan. Now, Thorazan is potentially better in this deck than he was in the Shaman deck, and the reason for it is you have 3 8-drops, which lets you curve on turn 7 with your 8-drops. So playing Thorazan on curve is actually amazing. The other thing is you do have less 6-drops, so there's one other 6-drop in here being Sylvanas. But the Emperor is what you'll prioritize over Sylvanas in most situations because you want to get your 8-drops out faster. It also lets your Consecrations cost 3, which is very relevant, makes them less awkward to curve, and as I said, your Quartermaster Muster for Battle turns from a turn 8 play into a turn 6 play, or, well, turn 7 technically. So on turn 8, you can use that with your hero power as well. So Thorazan, very, very good in this kind of deck, especially considering you have Lay on Hands to refill your hand a little bit once you've dumped all the cheap cards. Sylvanas, pretty much exactly the same explanation as Shaman. That effect is always good. Mind control effects are extremely powerful. It's very unique to Sylvanas and creates very awkward situations if they don't have a silence. And if they do have a silence, and they silence that instead of Tyrion. So I will happily play Sylvanas and get that silence instead of my Tyrion. The last card in this deck is Chromagus. Now, I didn't put this in the Shaman deck because it doesn't really work without dragons. However, in this deck, Dragon Consort reduces the cost by 2. Thorazan reduces the cost by 1, which means if you have Chromagus in your hand, you have 3 cards that let you ramp into it in Paladin. You can go Consort into Chromagus on turn 6. Good luck dealing with a 6/8 on turn 6. The other thing is you can go Thorazan into Chromagus, and if your Chromagus lives, you can play Lay on Hands. That's a combo. Gain 8 life, draw 6. That's astonishing. Not to mention that duplicate copies in this deck I think is actually probably more powerful than single copies of cards. So I'd rather draw 3 cards repeated than 6 individual ones, simply because they work so well with extra copies of themselves, really. So you get things like double consecrations, always amazing. And double Consecration is usually better than something like, say, if you drew Knife Juggler and Consecration or things like that. Same with Muster for Battle and Quartermaster, as you can actually draw 2 of those. So Chromagus, very, very good with lay on hands, and because of Dragon Consort and Thorazan, I think you can ramp him out enough to make him more or less a turn 6 or turn 7 play in a lot of games. As long as you draw him before you, as long as you draw him on like turn 5 or turn 6 or something, then you'll be able to play him earlier than most decks can actually get away with. So anyway, those are the 2 decks that I've been tinkering around with. Obviously these are Theorycraft because the cards aren't out yet. I just want to throw that out there, the cards are not out yet, so obviously these have been Theorycrafted. But anyway, if you like the content, please subscribe. If you have any feedback, put it in the comment section below. If you just want to talk about the decks or ask me about any decisions, I may have just forgotten about some cards, everyone does it, then just ask me and I'll see if I can respond to the best of my ability. But anyway, as for now, this has been Jotto, signing off.